My friends, today let's ponder and explore the depths of the Death Star archives, the most truly remarkable website for GoldenEye 007 in its day, chock full of content, mysteries, secrets, GameShark codes, and much more. A beacon of light in its time, and an inspirational trove of amazing knowledge compiled in our favorite game. In particular, I wanted to look at this somewhat silly page called Fake Screenshots and examine what is going on in each image. On this page, we see Death Star write this. Here are a bunch of fake screenshots that I've collected. They've been sent to me, in many cases, asking me if they're real or not. Others are intentionally faked, simply for the purpose of posting them as fake to display creativity. This page was first archived on the Wayback Machine in January 2002, though it likely existed even earlier to this. And what's interesting is that there are whole pages upon pages on Death Star's website dedicated to real screenshots, beta screenshots, GameShark screenshots, or other in-game oddities. And these pages upon pages of screenshots would be interesting to look into, perhaps in a stream or another video. Yet there's also this random page of fake screenshots, which just struck me as so interesting. You'll see what I mean. So let's go back in time and browse the internet as if it were more than 20 years ago, pondering the things that made it online one way or another and were preserved somehow.
Here we go!
Let's start with this one, which is a good barometer for the sorts of things we'll see here. Death Star writes, Trevelyan falling to his bloody death while cursing at Bond. The picture looks okay, but you can tell that the smoke is fake. It's still pretty good though. I mean, look at this amazing screenshot. Yanis is yelling something. We do see the text at the bottom of the page, and clearly the animation of Trevelyan is of him flying off the end of the stage in the final cutscene of the game. But the smoke being the giveaway is kind of funny because, the whole thing just looks so silly. Certainly the smoke does not look like smoke looks in game, but the fact that this was even considered pretty good for its time is quite something to ponder. Here's another one. Someone recently sent this in asking me if it was fake. The line where Trevelyan decides to end the chase is "Finish the job, James, if you can." But in this case, Trevelyan has just been pasted over top of James. I suppose in this image, the submitter, who it was has been lost to time, was wondering if there was some sort of alternative version where you could play as Trevelyan, perhaps chasing after Bond on Cradle. And that's why they submitted this to Death Star asking if it were real or fake. I suppose pasting text on top of another level of text may not have been the easiest thing to do back then with, the knowledge of how to use Photoshop-like tools, and Photoshop back then, it did exist, was a little more esoteric and uncommon. Here's another weird one, Frigate La Titanic Monte Carlo, and the page reads, I sure hope Leonardo DiCaprio was on that ship. This picture was obviously cut and pasted, but it's still cool. I actually heard that in the beta version, the ship did blow up after you escaped. So that's kind of an interesting bit of knowledge there. I don't know why we have the slander at Leo, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe back then he wasn't as popular on the internet or whatever. And yeah, an interesting tidbit that the ship did blow up. On the other hand, we do defuse the bombs actually when playing the stage. So perhaps that did get changed at some point in development. You can imagine a cutscene, maybe a more advanced cutscene where Bond is using the boat to leave the frigate behind, then it detonates, or who knows, but there you go. Now this one is unbelievably silly. You can see what it is, and the page reads, this is a cool picture. It's Homer Simpson working for Yanis in the depot. Hey Homer, did you remember to put ammo in your gun? I'm just kind of stunned, honestly. On one hand, yes, the Photoshop abilities weren't as widespread. It's a funny thing to edit. Just something that would be like a throwaway meme you would doom scroll past for a quarter of a second. making its way onto this website and being preserved more than 20 years later speaks to me in some weird way. It's Homer Simpson edited into GoldenEye. It makes no sense. It's the kind of thing that, a cool older brother would have done in 2000 or 1998 or whatever, learning Photoshop or some photo editing software. The picture almost just freezes me in my tracks for some weird reason. Just the fact that this still exists today, and how trite and trivial it would be to make today compared to the meaning of it years ago being submitted and uploaded and on this amazing website and still being visible today. I'm at a loss for words. Death Star writes, "It's odd job in the statue. Quite a good looking screenshot. Screenshot credit the bads." And so you wonder exactly what went into the bads submitting this screenshot to Death Star and asking if it were real or not. And even more interesting, I do wonder what caused this to end up on this pile of fake screenshots page, because I actually do know a way to get Oddjob on the statue. You use this GameShark code, which puts random guards into each level, and it only works once when you put it on one level one time, then you have to reset. But you could get Oddjob as the guard on statue, and this could be a screenshot from there. So there's an interesting one of Oddjob on the statue, and I wonder how it ended up here. There are a couple interesting multiplayer ones here. So this first one says, "This picture does look real. The photographer was sure to show the ammo on the ground because he wants you to think it's real. How come he didn't have the characters facing each other? That would prove realism. The picture is a fake, but very well done." And so yeah, we see this screenshot of what seems to be Dam multiplayer. Now, Dam is not a playable level in multiplayer in the original game. And, I suppose the ammo boxes were edited in with some kind of Photoshop. Of course, we'll notice this on the next image, but take a look at the radar in the top right. It is looking decent. It is transparent, which you do see in game. And so this is a very finely done fake, at least according to Death Star back in the day. And we can contrast this to the next image, which is this one, and it says, "Multiplayer Aztec. It's possible with a very glitchy GameShark code, but this one is a fake. The radar gives it away because it was pasted on with no opacity." And so in this case, unlike the Dam, the circular radar sections were just sort of copied and pasted on very crudely from another screenshot. And so this is like super, super basic cut and paste into Photoshop or some photo software back then, which again was not a skill everyone had even to access this kind of software. So, to its credit, that's interesting. Again, we see screenshot credit the bads. What a life. Imagine this guy making these interesting screenshots and submitting them to Death Star for one reason or another. That kind of blows me away as well. But this one was a much more crude screenshot. In both cases, I think you just kind of get two distinct screenshots. Maybe you use widescreen or 16:9 ratio in game, and you just simply, put one on top of another, bingo bango, stitch it together and make it look a certain way, which seems to be the case here. But again, the fact that these have been preserved and we're seeing them now, it just does something to me. Here's a fake pic of Bond in the Aztec. He has Joanna Dark's gun from Perfect Dark, and it appears as if he has her hand too. Now this one is just, again, so strange and silly. Like, why would someone Photoshop this, take the hand, cut around the hand of Joanna Dark, paste it over Bond's hand, bingo bank, and then submit it and ask Death Star, who had this great knowledge of the game at the time, like, is this real? Maybe they were wondering, was there some hidden sort of code to play as Joanna, some stop and swap, immense rare trick, but it's just a Photoshop job. Again, something that would be so trivial to do today, but made its way on this website years ago. This one's even more unbelievably silly. Natalia has her big head stuck in the prison bars. This pic doesn't look too bad. The only letters that are really obviously fake are the C in crap and the M in my. Natalia, crap, my head's stuck. I mean, the fact that Death Star is writing that this pic doesn't look too bad, like, that's just mind-blowing. Frankly, I guess this is some distorted mega decay mode where her head is stuck in the bars. What was going on here? Who photoshopped this? Who edited it? And it just blows my mind. One of the silliest images you could even imagine. It's like a YouTube poop nearly a decade before even those existed. Like, what series of events led to this image being created? That's truly amazing. Now, there's a few here that sort of touch on something that I talked about in my Citadel video. These sort of faked screenshots of the level menu selects or end screens. And we see some interesting data here. Check out this first one. The fictional level, the Buddha temple with the incorrect spelling. A version of this pic exists with the correct spelling somewhere. Screenshot credit the bads. And so we see that it says Mission 11 Buddha Temple Part 1 Enemy Base. And we just have the sort of 007 mode settings here. Again, you know, this was maybe something that someone made, maybe the bads, or maybe he just submitted it as a sort of rumor. You know, could there be these extra levels in the game that we unlock somehow? Citadel, whatever. In this case, it was enemy base. You know, what could such a stage be in the Buddha temple? And you can kind of imagine and fantasize playing such a stage, as I'm sure many young gamers did back in the day. Here's another one, and the page reads, "Here's a cool new fake of the Citadel from Stormcloud75 at AOL.com. It is obviously a fake, but it looks more realistic than the other Citadel fake we've seen. Of course, the classified was removed from the background, making it easier to fake." So that references, you know, the red classified that we see on a lot of the end screens in the game normally. This one reads, "Unofficial test mission, title Citadel, objectives, steal key, gain entry to main fort, kill Mayday." And it has activation code with some sort of interesting image in the level kind of picture of, I suppose, a Citadel. And again, one of many, many sort of urban legend and rumors of the stage that we see supporting evidence that was, you know, obviously faked. And again, these end screens would be trivial to fake nowadays, but back then they would have taken a little bit more effort. And we see one more Citadel one here. It says, "Of course this picture is fake. It's supposed to be the Citadel's objectives." A different menu picture. In this case, it's Mission 12, Citadel, Enemy Complex. And the objectives are locate the Aston Martin. You'll recall previously I read out a screenshot where it said Ashton Martin. B, crack code. C, locate key. D, protect civilian, an odd thing to do. And E, drive civilian out of complex. Kind of playing on the Citadel and complex being related possibly. So very interesting and odd screenshots, these end screens. And I find them interesting that they were put here because there is another section of Death Star's website where we see at least one other screenshot of an end screen. So here's one on a page he calls Submitted Artwork. And there's actually 5 pages of these. This would take, you know, hours upon hours to go through. But here are 2 in particular that I find interesting. A briefing for the casino level submitted by Tubular Luggage. And we see Mission 3 Casino, Part 1 French Casino, and the objectives are recover micro cameras, photograph Xenia, retrieve money from Vault, confirm Xenia's identity, and locate Speedboat. And below it we see a screenshot of Casino replacing Silo on the menu with the same image that was used on the menu, again submitted by Tubular Luggage. Now this one is, you know, very, very crudely photoshopped, very much of an artistic rendering, and I suppose that might be why it made it on this page instead, where Death Star writes, "I have received cool screenshots from people who have visited the website and I've posted some of them here. You can create your own screenshots or edit existing ones and submit them. Send your submissions to Death Star. Sending a URL of your screenshot on your web space is the best method. If you do not have web space, be sure to send the image as an attachment." You know, again, getting into how this even sharing images was more difficult back in the early 2000s and late 90s, and a feat that was difficult, which is why I find it so interesting that any of these were preserved. But if we look at this page, I mean, like, what's going on here? I don't want to get too deep into this because I'll probably do a stream about it at some point. Like, here's Pikachu on archives. What's going on with that? Here's Natalia crudely drawn into the tank. Here's a guard, watching GoldenEye. So just very, very crudely drawn stuff and very interesting images that have maintained their presence here on the Wayback Machine. But yeah, I wonder why Death Star considered some of them obviously fake and some of them sort of more submitted for fun in good work. And perhaps it's just a relic of it being a different bygone time and it not being too important to classify things exactly in certain places or whatever. He was just posting a bunch of interesting stuff about GoldenEye. And hey, aren't I doing the exact same after all these years? So hey, there was that look at Death Star's remarkable faked screenshots page. Thanks for watching and hanging out on the channel, guys. I've been away a little bit, kind of finding a nice abode in the Great White North here to winter over. So kind of settle in now, and I'll be pumping out the content as usual, back on my quicker pace that I've been on earlier this year. I do have a couple sponsored videos coming up, so bear with me on those, but there'll be a lot of GoldenEye content, Twine content, and other N64 glorious, nostalgic looks ahead. So a huge thanks to you for watching, my friends. A huge thanks to the channel members and the Patreon supporters for all of your support of my work. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you all in the next stream or video.